I've been living in Vietnam for 10 years now, so let's talk about some of the things that I wish I knew before moving to Vietnam. Because there are a lot of things that if I had known would have saved me a lot of time, stress, and made things a lot easier with my transition of getting settled in Vietnam. So I'm here by the Saigon River. As you can see over here, we've got landmark 81 behind me over there, that side, and also District 1 in that direction there. So I'm going to take you around the city a little bit and tell you about some of these things that I wish I had known, and we'll also get some food and show you a few spots around the city. So let's get into it. You can get the chili. This is the mắm ứa, and it's the Vietnamese fermented shrimp paste, which is quite pungent, but if you put some in there, it tastes really good. Just don't overdo it if it's your first time. So the first thing is related to eating Vietnamese food in Vietnam, and basically not being as hesitant about trying all the different dishes, for the main reason that I thought when I first arrived in Vietnam that I had to be wary about certain types of food or getting food from certain places, because you could potentially get sick from it. And that's what I'd heard online. A lot of people warn when you're traveling in Southeast Asia, don't put ice in your drinks, be careful about what food you eat. But for me, actually, I didn't get sick at all for the first couple of years in Vietnam. And when I finally did get food poisoning, it was actually from an Indian restaurant in Vietnam. I think to a certain extent it's true in some countries in Southeast Asia, especially when you go to small rural towns and things like that, to be wary about the food you eat. But when you're in a big city like Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi in Vietnam, you really don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Eating street food, eating at small little local restaurants like this, it's just something that, in my experience, you don't need to worry about, and you should just try every food that you can find, basically. What I think is true is that when you first get to Asia, you might take some time to adjust to the food here, and that can upset your stomach a little bit. But I'd already been living in South Korea for a year. I'd been traveling throughout Southeast Asia. So when I got to Vietnam, I was totally fine. So I don't think you have to worry about like the food safety as much as people say you might have to. Which means you should absolutely go out and try all the amazing Vietnamese food that there is to have here in Vietnam. I just had this great bowl of bún bò, which is a noodle soup with beef and a beef sausage as well. It also has blood pudding in it, which I'm not a huge fan of, but the sausage is really good and it comes with beef. This bowl was only 50K, which is less than $2, so great value. And that shows how affordable it can be to go out and eat in Vietnam, and that you should go and try as many dishes as you can. Don't worry about it. Yes, your stomach might take a little bit of time to fully adjust, but there's so many good foods in Vietnam. You should absolutely go out and try as much of it as you can when you get here. So I'm here at a cool little cafe and I got some salt coffee. So check that out. That is salt coffee, which is something that I never really thought of in my life before I came to Vietnam, and then I heard about it and it's really good. This one looks like it's got some kind of honeycomb on the top over here. Let me try that. Yeah, it's like a honeycomb type of thing. So let's try the salt coffee. I like how they've got these ice shavings in here instead of ice blocks. Pretty cool. And this cafe is called Treehouse something, and it's got a really nice design inside and from outside. It looks really cute. So there's so many good cafes in Ho Chi Minh City that you can try, and definitely try salt coffee. Egg coffee is also really good. Any coffee in Vietnam is really good. So here's a big one. I wish I was better prepared when I moved to Vietnam, both financially and with other aspects of moving to Vietnam. Financially, I had some money saved up because I'd been teaching English in South Korea, But I also spent a lot of that traveling around Southeast Asia. So when I arrived in Vietnam, my funds had diminished a bit and things would have just been a little bit less stressful if I had a bit more of a reserve. The good thing is that if you're earning money in the West, that money is going to go a lot further when you first arrive in Vietnam. So it's really worth just saving a bit more to arrive in Vietnam so that you don't have just enough to get to where you want to be, if that's getting a teaching job and starting to earn or something else. Just have a little bit more than that so you don't have that financial pressure that is really stressing you out when you get to Vietnam. The great thing is that you don't need a huge sum of money. With a few $1,000s, you can get started in Vietnam. If you're starting to teach English here, it will cover you for a few months of living expenses, but just have a bit more than you need because that little bit extra is going to cover any unexpected circumstances and just give you that general peace of mind. So we do have a startup cost guide, a teaching English in Vietnam guide that includes startup costs, things like salaries for teaching jobs, estimation of how much it costs per month to live in Vietnam. So you can download a copy of that. Just click the link in the description if you want more information about it. But I'd recommend just delaying starting by a little bit longer, saving up a little bit more, spend a month or two in the job that you currently have, not doing much at home and just saving each month. I recently saw a picture that said McDonald's pays $24 an hour right now. So just get a job back home, have a little bit more when you move to Vietnam, and then you won't be in a financially stressful situation when you get here. The same thing applies for documents and everything else that you need to bring, because little things like having the right clothes for Vietnam, while yes, there's loads of options that you can buy in Vietnam, although I would worry about shoe sizes that are like over size 10, US or UK size. A lot of people say, oh, you can get everything when you get here. And yes, it's true, except maybe for those really large sizes of clothes and shoes. It's just that everything is going to be a little bit harder when you get here, and finding things, navigating what you need to do, where to go, those kinds of things. Clothing is just one example, but I think the more prepared you are when you get here, the less of those things you have to do when you get to Vietnam. And there are a lot of things that you have to do when you're moving to a new country. And then if you're going to be teaching in Vietnam, you also need to get all your documents legalized. This is a whole process, and things change from time to time on the exact steps. So you don't want to come to Vietnam and haven't started thinking about that. And then you're forced to do expensive things like sending documents back to your home country to get them legalized and then sent back to Vietnam. International shipping can be expensive. I will admit, there is something kind of exciting about being spontaneous and just going to a new country and figuring it out. To a certain degree, that is what I did. But things were also different 10 years ago. Things were a little bit more lax in terms of documents and things like that when it came to visas and all those things. But nowadays, if you're wanting to come to Vietnam and teach English, you do need to do things by the books because things have tightened up and you need all the correct documents, and Vietnam loves its documents. Everything needs to be red stamped, it needs to be legalized, so it is a whole process. But the good thing is you can do all of that if you just get started early on it. So I'm about to drive my motorbike back to the Ninja Teacher TEFL Academy now, which reminds me of one thing that I wish I knew, is that you can drive a motorbike in Vietnam without a license. But there's a catch. So when I first got to Vietnam, I was living in Hanoi, and I'm not going to say online that I didn't have a license, but I'm also not telling you that I did have a license. But either way, back then, there were a lot of people that were driving motorbikes without licenses. And if you're riding a motorbike above 50 cc's, you do need a Vietnamese license. You can't use an international driver's permit for motorbikes. They're not accepted. It has to be a Vietnamese motorbike license. And getting one in Vietnam is pretty complicated. I'm not going to go into that here, but if you do have a motorbike license back home, bring it with you. It'll make the process a little bit easier when you get here because you can do some converting of licenses. So having the international driver's license or a license from back home in your home country, bring that along. It'll make the process of getting a Vietnamese license easier. Even if you've got a car license back home, just bring that with. You can do some converting. You might still need to do the riding test. It changes from time to time, but bring that along. But you still need a Vietnamese license if it's above 50 cc's. But the good news is you don't need one if it's a 50 cc motorbike. So yes, you actually can ride in Vietnam without a license, but it has to be below 50cc or at 50cc. And the nice thing is there's a lot of electric bikes now which are rated at 50cc's, which are actually a little bit more powerful. So it's more than enough to get around the city. And I wish I'd known that because, well, if you're riding a motorbike above that without a license, if you did get into an accident, someone got hurt, you could get into a lot of trouble. Not to mention if you have insurance, that won't cover you if you're riding illegally. So you really don't want to be in that situation. So the good thing is when you get here, you can just ride a 50cc motorbike. So definitely go that route until you get a driver's license here, which can be done once you've been here a little while. So do a few lessons, get comfortable with the roads before you ride a bike. But don't worry if you don't want to ride a motorbike, there are plenty of options. You can take Grab or Sun motorbike taxis. You just call them on your app. It's really easy. The public transport is getting better in Ho Chi Minh City. There's a metro now, there's buses. So don't worry if you don't want to ride a motorbike, but I do wish I'd known that, yeah, you could just get a 50cc motorbike when you get here, and that's the easiest way to ride a motorbike. Just go back here to the office. There's our office, main classroom over there. And this here is our community room and second classroom. Got some couches and the second classroom over there. So one important thing when it comes to getting a teaching job in Vietnam that I wish I knew is that there are several things that you should consider that might actually be more important than how much you're paid, especially for your first job. So when I went to go teach English in Hanoi, luckily I had experience previously from teaching English in South Korea. I'd taken a 4-week in-person training course before that to get my TEFL certification. And that actually comes back to what I was saying earlier about being prepared. You also need to be prepared as a teacher when it comes to getting a job. So making sure that you do a good TEFL training course, ideally one that's in person, that has a lot of teaching practicum, that's led by experienced trainers, that has feedback on your teaching so that you improve throughout the 4-week period. Some people do take an online course, but having that in-person practicum and training is really valuable because ultimately you are going into the classroom to be a teacher. So anyway, that was about the points of being prepared that I was previously talking about, and whether you do your TEFL course before you come to Vietnam or you do it in Vietnam like our training course that we have here, that is another way that you should be prepared. But talking about the schools that you work at, I remember when I got to Hanoi, I was just looking for the highest hourly rate. And I did find a few jobs that had what seemed to be a good hourly rate, but the problem was those schools couldn't often give me enough hours to fill my schedule. So that meant I had to work at multiple schools. Then sometimes they changed the schedule, the hours conflicted, and these schools didn't support with visas. They didn't have a good HR department where they helped you with all of that and supported you as a new teacher. There was no professional development. So my point is that if I were to do it again, I would make sure I chose a school that helped me with a good HR department that knows how to process all your documents and will get you a work permit, not some vague promises of maybe getting you a work permit and a temporary resident card at some point. They should have a clear process for that. And then also a school that has good professional development and training, because as a new teacher, it's going to be difficult to become a good teacher. And even if you've done a 4-week in-person training course, you still need a lot of mentoring and support while you're getting into teaching. So some schools aren't going to offer that. So that's something I'd highly look out for. And then just a school that's going to give you a reliable package. They're going to give you enough hours to get by. And I think all of that is a lot more important than a high hourly rate as a first-time teacher. Once you've been teaching for a year or two, you can look out for schools that pay even higher, and at that point you'll know what to look out for. But getting a school that's going to support you in your first job is definitely more important than maybe a couple of dollars extra without getting all of that important stuff. So if I was doing it again, I'd look for a school that provides better support, good HR, visa, sponsorship, and professional development, instead of only looking at the hourly rate. And then there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and this is actually something that I didn't know, but I actually did. So what I mean by that is when I first came to Vietnam, I actually traveled a lot. So I did this without really thinking, but it's something I would advise other people to do, is really try and do some cheap travel in Vietnam. Now there is a lot of luxury travel that you can do, and sure, if you want to splurge, I've done more of this as I've got a bit older, gone to nice resorts and things like that. But at the same time, when I first came to Vietnam, I did a lot of really budget travel, and some of the best experiences I had were like budget travel in Vietnam. I didn't spend a lot. I actually went to like really cheap places. I traveled like on buses, motorbikes, and I actually didn't spend a lot of money when I first got to Vietnam on travel. And I would stay in like $8 a night hostels, and I just did some amazing things. And looking back, some of those trips were the most exciting, adventurous trips I've ever done, and really didn't break the bank whatsoever. I wasn't earning a lot. I was only teaching like a few hours a week teaching, so I didn't have a huge budget to spend on travel, and because of that, I just made the most of it and did a lot of budget travel. So I'd highly recommend that. Do budget travel when you get to Vietnam, because like you'll have some of the best adventures you've ever had. I guarantee it. And yeah, sure, splash out from time to time on like nice luxury travel if you want to do that, but don't sleep on like cheap travel in Vietnam. Places like Ha Giang Loop, Phang Nga, even Sapa, all these places you can do really cheaply. Dalat, Da Nang. And then the other thing I wish I knew is that moving abroad is going to be twice as hard to do in some ways, but also not as much of a big deal as it feels like. In some ways, being abroad in a new country is really difficult. I think some of the things you might struggle with is the first few weeks or even months of adjustments to the country. In some ways that might feel really tough because things are new, things are different. There's so many aspects of the culture. Even what I'm doing now, like walking along the side of the street with motorbikes going past, that's going to be intimidating for a lot of people the first time that they get here. So in a lot of ways that can feel tough, and you might deal with homesickness, you might be overwhelmed. So those things can be difficult, and in a lot of ways you might not be expecting that, and that will hit you hard. But at the same time, when I moved abroad, I remember having this experience of thinking, oh, this is not such a big deal. I'm here now. This is what I'm doing with my life right now at this moment, maybe not forever. And I was also totally okay with it. Because when you're sitting at home thinking about moving abroad, it might seem like this daunting thing. How could I possibly do that? How could I go live in a new country? But I remember thinking, oh, wow, this wasn't such a big deal. Like, I'm here now. This is what I'm doing with my life. I'm going to be teaching for however long I want to, and that's pretty cool. And I think for a lot of people, overcoming that feeling of this is a really big deal is probably the one thing that could help them to make that decision to move abroad. And I'm not saying that everyone should, and I don't think you should do it unless it's something you really want to do. But if you do want to, if you've been watching videos online or you've been thinking about it for a long time, maybe things have lined up in your life so it's the right time, then I don't see any reason why you shouldn't do it. Because once you're here, you quickly get used to things and you realize, okay, I can have this experience I'm having at this time in my life and I can enjoy it, and that's cool. That's awesome. And yes, you'll have the struggles and challenges, and those can be tough at times, but in my opinion, totally worth it. And if you're curious about what other people feel about it, you can watch some of the interviews on this channel with our teachers that have come through our programs to start teaching English in Vietnam, to see what they say about it. So you're not just hearing from me. There's other people that have also done it. And in these interviews, all of our teachers share what they got out of teaching abroad and living abroad. So give some of those a watch if you like. So you can watch one of those interviews right here. If you are interested in teaching English in Vietnam, you can head over to ninjateacher.com to see how we can help, and stay tuned for more videos about living in Vietnam and teaching English in Vietnam, and I'll speak to you soon.